sort of leading scholars in the field of education policy and leadership and change. Both of those colleagues contribute to the programme. You'll also have the chance to meet other colleagues like myself and Stephen Courtney, Alex McTaggart, B. Hughes, all of whom, if you have a look at our research profiles, which are available on the University of Manchester website, you'll see that we're very active in the field of educational leadership and management, and that's through our research, through our writing, and also through our teaching and our scholarship as well. So I suppose that's a long-winded way of saying that this programme is very much underpinned by the research of the individuals who are on the programme team. Okay, so myself and Stephen run the programme, we lead the programme and we orchestrate it in that sense, but it's not just myself and Stephen. You'll have access to the work and you'll be able to meet and speak to many of the other colleagues who work in the Manchester Institute of Education, who are also doing research in educational leadership and management, and that research directly informs lots of the curriculum, lots of what we will share with you and talk about with you during the programme. We draw on lots of other work as well. It's not just those the work that comes from Manchester, but the programme's very much research informed, and I think that's one of the distinctive elements of the programme at Manchester. And of course, that aligns very much with the research intensive culture that we have at the University of Manchester, and which is also very well known across the world. And I'll talk a little bit more about that afterwards. Okay, next slide, please, Jaslyn. Yeah, so I mean, here you can see where the University of Manchester sits within those sort of global league tables, and certainly, you know, it's within the world's top 50 universities, and quite recently we're very proud to hold the world's #1 ranking in the impact rankings for social and environmental impact of our research. And the Manchester Institute of Education, which sits within the School of Education, Environment, Education and Development, or SEED as it's known within the Faculty of Humanities, our institute, which is where ELIP is run from, is one of the top 10 education departments in the whole of the United Kingdom, and that's according to the very recent Research Excellence Framework results from 2022, which were announced just over a month ago, and also the QS World University Rankings by subject from last year as well. So as I said, you don't need to take my word for it. You can go and look at those rankings, and you can see that we've got some really strong, well-established researchers and academics working in the Manchester Institute of Education, many of whom work in education leadership and management, and who contribute to the Educational Leadership and Practice programme. Next slide, please, Jaslyn. Okay, Stephen, would you like to talk colleagues through the course?
Thank you, Paul. Yes,
structure?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, we have done this presentation before, but in consultation with our colleagues, with Jaslyn, Venus and Jan, we've decided to include rather more detailed information this time, because we were being asked questions when we've done the presentation before about the detail of the course structure. So it might be that this is more detail than you want at the moment, but it does anticipate some of the questions that have come up before. So on the next few slides, we're going to talk through how the course is structured. So if you could look first of all at this one with a lot of dates on it, we have been able with this particular slide to include dates that would apply for anyone who begins the course in September this year, in September 2022. And I'm mainly going to be referring to that second column because it talks about, or it includes the different course units. And we're going to say a little more about each in a moment. But you can see, you know that this is a 2-year programme, and it works on the basis of 4 units in the first year, and then 2 units and a final project, the equivalent of a dissertation, in the second year. So that particular slide shows that there are, in the first year, periods of, it's actually 11 weeks. So between September and November, the first unit is called Models of Educational Leadership, and then engaging with educational leadership research, and so on. As I say, we'll say a little more about what each of those units consists of later in this presentation. That's the first year, and then there is a break during the summer, not a very long break. Students don't get a very long break, and neither do lecturers. Starting again at the same time, roughly beginning of September in 2023, 2 more units, and then following a break, there is the final research stage. So that shows you, and you can obviously refer to this afterwards, that shows you the broad outline of the 2-year program. And then if we could go on to the next slide, please. This shows how those course units relate to a really important and special aspect of educational leadership in practice, and that is the conferences. And the conferences are shown on here. And it's important that we emphasize this is not a distance learning program. It's not a face-to-face program. It's a hybrid structure, and it's a blended learning program. So there are opportunities to study face-to-face in the conferences, and also to be supported through tutorials and seminars which will be online. And that's summed up very well in that box at the top. Blended learning, 4 course conferences, interactive online learning, and then the independent project at the end. So the information from the previous slide is included there, but also an indication of when the conferences take place. What a conference is teaching time. It's actually teaching content for each of the course units. We will have guest speakers. We will draw on that range of expertise that Paul referred to previously, sorry. But the conferences will include teaching for the next 2 course units. So it will set out the requirements of the course unit. There will be input related to it to prepare students for what is to follow over the remaining 11 weeks of that course. So again, an outline, but we're now going on to look briefly, it will be briefly, at each of the course units that are mentioned there. So if you look at the courses that are mentioned on that slide, Models of Education Leadership, Engaging with the Research in Educational Leadership, and so on, we're now going to say a little more about each of those. So Paul, do you want to pick up the first one? Next slide, please.
Yeah, certainly, Stephen. Thank you for that overview, really very helpful. So yeah, as Stephen said, we're just going to quickly talk to you, we'll give you a very, very quick overview. I won't labour these too much on what each of the course units constitutes. And we begin with the core course units. And these are very much central to the programme and the curriculum. And these are kind of the foundation blocks, I would say, of the rest of the programme. And you'll find that when you're introduced to models of educational leadership, and that's at the moment led by Dr. Alex Gardner-McTaggart, and he'll talk to you and share with you and introduce you to a range of different ways of thinking about educational leadership and practice and what it means and how it's understood and how it plays out in different contexts. Okay, those different typologies of leadership. You then follow that with a more in-depth look at some of the research into educational leadership. Okay. And that follows neatly on top of the model. So you understand some of the theory around educational leadership, and then we introduce you to some of the leading sort of research within the field of educational leadership, the sort of empirical research that's been undertaken in the field of educational leadership over the past sort of half a century or so. And what those 2 units do, I think, as I said, they provide a sort of bedrock for the rest of the programme. And you'll find that you'll return back to some of the themes that are introduced in those initial units again and again as you start to build your knowledge and develop your practice in the area of educational leadership as you move through the programme. Next slide, please. Okay, so in semester 2, this begins. In fact, actually, Stephen, do you want to talk about this? Because Stephen leads the Educational Leadership as a Social Practice unit. This is Stephen's unit, so I'm going to hand you over to Stephen to talk about this one.
We talked earlier, Paul mentioned the recognition that the University of Manchester has for social responsibility. And if you have studied or been involved in educational leadership, you'll know that very often it's seen as something that is done by one person, the principal maybe, or the vice chancellor of a university. And what we explore through educational leadership as a social practice is that leadership is not the domain of one person. It involves many people, and it involves dealing with interpersonal relationships, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. And so here we look at educational leadership in a global context, and we encourage our students to work together to explore issues of educational leadership as part of that particular course unit. It also is an initial experience in conducting a very small scale project where students have the ability to choose what they want to study in their own context. And so that will be a small piece of empirical research done in your own context. And that context, looking at our current students, we have students who are studying who are employed in kindergartens, in primary schools, in secondary schools, in colleges, in universities, maybe working across a group of schools, maybe not all in teaching roles. It's possible for people in any of those different contexts, provided that they meet our entry requirements, to take part in the programme. And then the second unit in semester 2, in other words, the final unit of this first year of the programme, is a choice. We currently have 2 optional units. We found our students so far have been roughly equal in their choices between the 2. One is called Digital Technologies and Educational Leadership, and the other is called Leadership of International Schools. So you would choose one of those 2 as the final unit for this semester. Maybe do a similar thing for year 2. Paul, you do the first one and I'll do the second.
Thanks, Stephen. Yes. So yes, next slide, please, Justin. Thank you. So semester 3, or the first semester of your second year of study, will begin with another 2 core units. The first one that you will study will be Leading Educational Change. I currently lead that particular unit. And as I said before, what we start to do in these 2 units is to start to build on those initial core units that you did at the very start of the first year. Okay, so we talk about educational change, but we do that very much through a leadership lens, okay, and how leadership and change are very much 2 sides of the same coin, if you like, and how change, the role that change plays in leadership, and the kind of motivators and the facilitators and barriers to change, and also some critical perspectives on the change literatures as well, and allowing you to think and reflect on a change initiative in your own particular professional context, and your role in that, and your reflections on that, and how that affected and influenced your leadership practice. We then move on swiftly, as Stephen said, with just a week's break, into educational policy and leadership. And again, we very much look at this idea of policy through a leadership lens, and how school leaders and educational leaders and professionals enact policy and design policy and implement policy, and also some of the wider sort of ideas of policy architecture as well. How is policy designed? How is it developed, and where, and what does it look like, and what does it involve? Whose voices are represented by various policies and different policies? And in doing so, we step back a little bit, talk about things, wider societal sort of shifts that influence what policy looks like in educational settings and organizations. And we talk about things like welfareism and social democracy and neoliberalism as in significant factors and influencing factors within policy architecture. So I suppose the takeaway from those two units is that we start to push you into a more critical space, hopefully building on those academic skills that you've been honing during that first year of study, and start to get you to think a little bit more outside of the box, but also allowing you to sort of consider what all of these things mean in relation to educational change and educational policy. What do those things mean for your own practice and your own professional role? And certainly you'll find that a lot of the assessments that we ask you to complete as part of the program have an in-practice element. Okay, so that in practice isn't just part of it's not just a snappy title to capture your attention for this master's program. It's central to everything we do. We talk about theory and we talk about research, and we talk about some quite abstract issues and some wider societal issues, but we also very much focus on what those things mean for your practice in your individual context as well. Okay, so the program can be very much individualized to your own professional role. And again, we think that's a real distinctive element of the program and a real strength of the program as well. And certainly, don't take my word for it. Take a look on the website, look at some of the feedback that we've had from students over the last couple of years, and you'll find that they've also reflected on the benefits of that. Okay, next slide, Jaslyn. Stephen, do you want to take them through the last semester?
Thank you. Just to pause for a moment, thank you for the question in the chat, and thank you, Venus, for acknowledging that. We will respond to questions later. We'll pick up any questions that come up. Thank you. Now, when you get to the end of semester 3, there is a formal process that we go through before we proceed to semester 4, before you can proceed to semester 4. By the end of semester 3, you will have completed 6 course units, and before progressing to the final stage, we review progress because you must have passed all 6 of those course units before you can proceed to the final stage. And so we have an examination board, we review everyone's marks. It may be that some units a student has passed first time, which is great. It may be that they need a resit in order to reach the standard for a pass, and we review all of that. And then we move on to semester 4. If you are interested, by the end of semester 3, you should have gained sufficient credits in order already to have the diploma, the postgraduate diploma in education. That is not the master's degree, that is a diploma. To complete the master's degree, you need to go on to the research stage, and that is what is on this slide for semester 4. Now, the research stage is in 2 parts, which are set out there: research skills suite followed by the project. By the time you get to semester 4, you will have an idea of what your project is going to be. And this is very different from semesters 1, 2, and 3. In semesters 1, 2, and 3, there is a taught program that we have planned for you, and that is what everyone does. Those are core units. There is just one choice, as I mentioned previously with semester 2. But with semester 4, you really have a great deal of freedom and choice about what your final project will be. It can depend on which country you're studying in, which context you're studying in, whether it's early years or whether it's higher education. It could depend on your role in your organization, whether you are a principal, we have lots of principals, or where you are a relatively newly qualified teacher, or even member of the support staff, non-teaching staff in an organization. Plenty of freedom there. The limits to your freedom are fairly obvious, judging by the title of the program. It must be something to do with education, it must be something to do with leadership, and it must be something to do with practice in an institution. So within those limits, so much flexibility about what you do. So by the time you begin semester 4, you will have some idea of what your final project will be, your final inquiry will be. But before you start on that, we have 3 taught research skills topics which are listed there. So you will have an idea of your topic, but this will enable you to develop it, to design it, to develop the appropriate methods by which you want to investigate this in your setting. And those methods might involve observing teaching or meetings, might involve using a survey or questionnaire for some colleagues or some people you don't know so well. It might involve interviewing people. It will certainly involve reading more literature and reviewing that literature. So we have 3 parts to the research skills unit, the research skills suite: formulating a topic, designing it and setting out your methods, and making sure that you're addressing questions of research ethics and social responsibility. And then you go on to the project. And that can be literature-based or it can be practice-based, but it will be about educational leadership in practice. One thing that we haven't used and on these slides, and we are sometimes asked about this, and it's how many words do I have to write? So I will say this now, that the 6 units that we've talked about for semesters 1, 2, and 3, those are concluded with an assignment of 4,000 words each. So those assignments are of 4,000 words. The research skills suite is fairly similar. They're 3 assignments. They're about 1,500 words each. So you could say 4,000 words worth again. And the final project is 6,000 words. Now, on some programs, as you will know, we end with a dissertation. We actually refer to this as a project. Apologies, colleagues, for not changing the word dissertation to project on here, but it's the equivalent of a dissertation, but instead of a single big piece of work, it's broken down into shorter pieces of work that come to roughly the same length in the end. With your project, you will have a project supervisor. So one of the tutors will have meetings with you and will discuss your project and will support with that. So the project isn't large group teaching, it's more individual working with a project supervisor. Paul, is there anything that I should add to those slides? We may get some questions about them.
I don't think so, Steve. I think you've been pretty comprehensive there. Thank you. Next slide, please.
You get the Blackboard one, Paul.
Yeah, we did have Pam Giblin, one of our colleagues here, to talk us through the Blackboard learning environment. She's not able to join us today, so yeah. I mean, we can whistle through these slides fairly quickly. This is really just to give you a kind of idea of what the virtual learning environment looks like, and this has been a main port of call for you on the program. If you do decide to enroll, everything that you need for the program, all the learning materials, the curriculum, all of the key dates will all be here on the Blackboard learning environment. And you can see there down that left-hand side, it's fairly user-friendly. You've got things that are relating to assessment, tutorials, there's discussion boards, all the learning materials, key contacts, any announcements on the program, key dates as well. Next slide, please. You'll also find within the Blackboard environment a range of videos that have been embedded. So a lot of the time on the program is self-study. You'll work your way through the program. That's the sort of distance learning element of this. As Stephen said, it's very much a blended program with a hybrid structure. But the bit that you'll be doing on your own will be when you're working through these different units in between tutorials with tutors like myself or Stephen. And so there's a range of videos in there that you can take a look at that'll help you to sort of get to grips and understand some of the content that you'll be following and reading through and working through as you work your way through those 11-week units. Okay, and you can see there our colleague Dr. Alex McTaggart introducing you to his units on models of educational leadership. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then as I said, key dates. So in each of the units, you'll find a table there with key dates, and this is a helpful and very useful link because this timetable tells you where you should be ideally in each of the weeks that you're studying. I should emphasize here that the tutorials aren't negotiable. They will occur on the dates that they are stated in those tables of key dates. But the pace at which you work through these different themes, this is a suggestion or a recommendation, but we do allow students some flexibility and freedom in terms of the pace at which they want to work through this work. So clearly, we wouldn't expect you to try to squeeze all of the work in to week 11, for example. But if you want to get started on week 1 and then something happens and you have to have a break for a week or so, and you need to catch up in your own time and work a bit faster or a bit slower, depending on how you want to access it, then the program has that flexibility built in. We're very much aware that the typical student on this program is doing this part-time, obviously, because it's a part-time program in that sense, and they're doing it in line or in conjunction with possibly a full-time or part-time professional role, and doubtless lots of other things going on in your busy lives as well. So the program's been developed to, as far as possible, allow that flexibility with your own professional and personal lives. Okay, next slide, please. And then, yeah, this is what the typical course unit will look like. There are a number of themes between 4 and 5, and you'll just literally work your way through these themes as you click through. And there are different things that you can do, different activities. Some of it's reading, some of it's video based, some of it requires you to provide some feedback or getting involved in a discussion, maybe make a video. And there are lots of different ways in which you can access the learning materials. We try to make them as diverse and engaging as possible. Next slide, please. And then, yeah, there'll be a reading list for each of the course units as well, where hopefully most of it is accessible remotely through the university library, and you can download articles and book chapters and reports and blogs and various reading materials that we recommend you take a look at as you work your way through the program in order to develop your knowledge and your understanding of the literatures and the various different areas that we introduce you to. Okay, next slide, please. And then, as Stephen said, he touched a little bit before on the assessment, so I don't need to talk about that in too much detail, but this is a typical assessment, a typical assignment that you'll find for the units, and all the detail of each assignment will be available to you as soon as you start that unit. So if you're one of these people who immediately wants to know exactly what you need to do at the end of the unit and how you're going to be assessed in order to pass the unit, then you can find that information out as soon as you start the unit. That information will be available, and you can go and take a look at what you would be expected to do at the end of that unit in order to pass the unit. Okay, next slide, please.
I think this one.
Okay. Yeah, you can go on this one, Stephen. There's just a couple of slides now, just to finish off a bit of an overview. So I'll hand you back over to Stephen.
Thank you. And I'd like to make some more general points about the Educational Leadership in Practice programme at this point. And some of the things that make this quite a special programme for the Manchester Institute of Education. And included in that, I am actually going to pick up the answer to one of the questions in the chat. And the question was this: may I know whether this course is suitable for frontline teaching practitioners if I don't get involved in any administrative role in the university context? The course is suitable for frontline teaching practitioners. And we'd want to stress that this is not a training course in being a school leader or a university leader. You will have access through other routes. There are plenty of training courses around that teach you the functions of leadership in educational organisations. This master's degree is about understanding leadership, and that can be understood from various starting points. It isn't necessarily for a vice principal wanting to be a principal, for example, although it could be. It is about understanding educational leadership and theorizing on and reading about leadership in the broadest sense. So the course is suitable for those who are working in educational practice in various contexts, who meet the entry requirements, which we'll come on to or remind you of later. One or two other things to mention. Paul and I are both very experienced in teaching on courses for part-time students. In fact, almost all of our teaching currently is on that sort of program. We have programs, for example, for teachers working in the United Kingdom who are full-time teachers. That's a different program. So we're very aware of the pressures of part-time study, and that's behind some of the flexibility behind this program. That we know that if you have a full-time job in education or even a part-time job in education, you cannot guarantee to attend in the same place every Wednesday at the same time for 30 weeks of the year, 30 or 40 weeks of the year. So the program is built flexibly around that, and we do understand that, and that those pressures mean that we need flexibility also over deadlines and so on. The only fixed deadlines that we have are those, as Paul mentioned, for tutorials and for submitting assignments. The second point I'd make about the distinctiveness of the program, we've been through the various course units that are part of this program. I think it's important to stress these are not course units that have been written for other programs that have just been put together in a new package. Every course unit has been designed afresh. They're all new course units based on our provision and our expertise, but they have all been written specially for blended learning for part-time students who are on this program. I'd also like to mention the diversity of our students on this program, which is one of the things that's most attractive for the lecturers who teach on it. You will perhaps be aware through your two centres that we have other centres. We have a centre in Manchester, of course. We have a centre in Shanghai. We have a centre in Dubai. We have students, though, from many other countries. I started writing down a list of the countries from which our ELIP students come. I got to about 17 different countries, including North and South America, Europe, Africa, as well as Asia. So it's a very diverse group, and at conferences we'll be seeking opportunities to bring you together with students from those different countries. I will pick up one more question here. Which is, in what fields are graduates of this course working? But if by fields we mean particular types of institutions, they cover every age range of student, from kindergarten to final year university students. We have our current students and our graduates working in all of those, at all of those different stages of education. We also have those who are working, for example, in school trusts across a range of schools, or with service providers to universities in schools. For example, in IT, we have a colleague who works across a range of schools in IT. And the other point that I would make about that is the different levels within the organization and levels of experience. We have students who have been school principals for more than 10 years. We have students who are at an early stage of their career. And I have to say that when they come together, both of those types of students, if you like, have advantages, but also disadvantages, because if you've been working in a senior position for a long time, you have a lot of knowledge and experience, but maybe you haven't studied at master's level before. So there are challenges for all. So I probably should talk to the slide now, having said all of that. So this is about concepts of educational leadership, creating and facilitating change, and thinking about conditions of change. I'm sure that in every single field throughout society, there are conditions have changed, but in education, probably more than most. So it is about how educational leaders respond to navigate change. And just to stress the point I made before, by educational leaders, we are not talking about one person in any organization. We are not only talking about the head teacher or the principal. It is those who are involved in the responsibility for making the organization work, I guess, which can be very many people. Okay, should we go on to the next slide now, please? Paul and I are fortunate, really, in that entry requirements is something that we need to be aware of, but actually our colleagues in Manchester and in the different centres around the world will manage the entry requirements and will occasionally ask us a question if there is any doubt, but these specific 4 points, I think, are fairly clear about the entry requirements. All of the study, of course, is in the English language, and therefore an English test or the equivalent of the IELTS test is important there. And you can see there that we've said at least 2 years professional experience or initial qualification in teaching. So that might be reassurance in relation to whether this program is suitable for those at perhaps an earlier stage of their careers. Certainly, we're not saying you have to have been in a leadership position for 10 years or anything like that in order to meet the entry requirements. I'll pass over to you, Paul, but I think we're on to the end now. So if there are any final comments, and then perhaps we can pick up questions.
Thanks, Stephen. Yes, can we have the final slide, please?
We're on it.
Oh, we're on it. Okay. Okay, right. Fantastic. Okay, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Jaslyn. Okay, so let's see if we can pick up some of these questions that we haven't answered, and Stephen, perhaps we can work through these between us. So,
thank you, Jaslyn. That's great.
Yes, thank you very much, Jaslyn. So, the first one I can see that hasn't been answered. Thank you, Venus, for answering the questions about the tuition fees. That was really helpful. Stephen, I'm going to field this one for you for the first one. How much time do you expect to spend working on assignments for each course unit? That's quite a tricky question, isn't it, really? What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's under two headings, isn't it, really? And we're proper. If you want me to say a number of hours, that's quite difficult. There is an official document that sets out expectations for the number of hours that you should be spending on each of the course units. Don't have that to hand at the moment, but that will be on Blackboard, and it will say this is the number of hours you should be spending on this. If you have to write a 4,000-word assignment, then to be honest and to be realistic, some people would spend much longer, need to spend much longer on that than others. Certainly that individual study will be very important. The number of directed hours, if you like, if it was, how many hours are you actually directed to study? It is quite small, because we have the conferences, which as an earlier answer has shown, we hope you would attend, but in between those, the study is very much self-directed. So although it might not seem a particularly helpful answer, what I would say is you need to work enough hours in order to be able to engage with the tutorials, set aside some time for reading, and be able to submit the assignments on time. I think that to quote the question there, I am concerned about the amount of assignments and about the amount of time working. Absolutely, you must be. You have to be concerned about that, because taking on a master's degree is a challenge on top of what we would call the day job of your professional work. You do need to be able to spend a certain amount of time on this. And we've spoken to different students about this, and some students will say, right, I set aside this number of hours every week. Every Sunday morning, that's when I work on my master's. Other students say something completely different. They say, I can't do that. However, what I can do is to set aside maybe a whole week when my school is not in session. And that's when I work intensively to get the work done. That's very much down to individuals. We can advise on that in tutorials and seminars. One thing that our students do find useful is to be given some informal deadlines. So we've got the formal ones that Paul and I don't control. Actually, if the university sets a date for an exam board, then we're going to have assignments that are ready for that. But the informal things that we can set, you know, here are the tutorials, here's a time when your tutor is available for informal drop-ins, that sort of thing, our students do find helpful. So I do apologize for not giving you an, you know, sort of formal number, you know, the answer is 45 or something like that. Doesn't quite work that way. But the message is certainly that you must look at the content, and you will need to set time to do that. And you will all have, we know all of our students have very busy and demanding professional work that has to take priority sometimes.
Thank you, Stephen. I think that was a very comprehensive answer. And I think the main takeaway from that is that, you know, it's difficult doing a master's program, particularly doing it part-time. So you mustn't be under any illusions about the challenges of doing master's study at such a, you know, well-established institute as the University of Manchester. But hopefully you'll find it fulfilling and rewarding as well, and it, you know, it will be worth all the hard work. I've not yet met a graduate on any of the master's programs that wish they hadn't bothered doing the master's program that they graduated for. Okay. The next question is very easy. Sorry, Stephen, but I seem to have got a much easier one there. Is there a one-year full-time program for this? No, Darren, there isn't. Okay. A resounding no for that one. Stephen answered the question about the different fields or different occupations or sectors of the school system. I think the graduates of this course are working. That's fine. Thank you, Christina, for that comment. Frankie, okay. Will all those face-to-face conferences fall into the weekends, either Saturday or Sunday? If I'm being honest with you, probably not. The reason for that is that we have a program that we're running the program out of probably 4 or 5 centres by the time the Singapore cohort start in September. So what that means is that we have to try to run a 3-day conference for each of those centres around the same time of year. The intention is that they will be face-to-face. So it means that we can't always accommodate every centre having a weekend conference. What we can say is that we will alternate them at the very least, so that if the first conference falls in the week, then the following conference in the February or the March will fall on a weekend. I think that's probably the best we can probably do, just due to logistics. It just wouldn't be possible for us to run every single conference on a weekend for every single centre all the time. So we can say that we will alternate them. So there'll be a weekend one at one part of the year in the March maybe, and then it may be in the week in the September or the October, depending when they fall. Okay. I mean, that's a good question, Stephen, isn't it? The final question there that's on the Q&A, but that Venus has helpfully pasted into the chat for us from Zhang Gao. Based on previous experience, can I know what percentage of graduates will continue into PhD study? I don't think we've got a percentage, have we, Stephen? One of our students from the very first cohort who's about to graduate this year is also now going to pursue doctoral study at a different university. I think Glasgow. So it's not unprecedented that this kind of master's study does lead on to doctoral study, and certainly I would say that the ELIT program is a very good preparation for the kind of thinking and kind of conceptual development that you're going to need if you are interested in doing doctoral study. I don't know if we have any students from this cohort that are about to graduate in November time, Stephen, for doctoral study. I don't know if you know of any that are thinking of pursuing it, but I've certainly had conversations with students on this program, and there are a small number that do certainly show an interest in that. So it's not unprecedented, and I think it would be possible.
Yeah, our based on previous experience question in terms of this program, our previous experience is limited because it's a relatively new program. So it would be misleading to give too much information, if you like, based on graduates from the ELIP program. I think there are two things we would say. One is we have experience of students graduating from part-time programs at Manchester. Paul and I are supervising one such student at the moment who have graduated from a part-time master's and are now onto the are now studying at doctoral level. The other thing is that a good grade, a good mark for this program would stand you in good stead for an application for doctoral study, and on a par with any other master's program. So certainly a distinction or a high merit mark on the MA Education Leadership in Practice, as has happened in the case of the student that at Glasgow that Paul's just mentioned. It would be a good point in your favour if you're applying for doctoral study. And the doctoral study, whether that's a full-time doctorate, which is usually 3 or 3.5 years in the UK, or a part-time doctorate, which is usually 6 years in the UK.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Stephen. I was going to say we've got a couple of questions left, and I know
Yes,
we're running a little bit short. We're running a bit short on time, aren't we?
The deferral question.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
And the question here, if you haven't seen this, since the MA programme schedule is quite tightly packed, it certainly is. Would it be possible to apply for the course deferral if needed? Yes. Well, the answer is yes. In normal terms, the university, the term that the University of Manchester uses is an interruption, but usually it is limited to one interruption. So, for example, to be honest, we prefer you not to do this, but the answer is yes, you can. For example, if you completed the first year of the programme, especially if you completed it successfully, to say, I would like a deferral, I would like an interruption for 6 months and then resume my studies after that, then yes, that is absolutely part of your right and entitlement as a student.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, so just one final question, and that's from Toshikazu.
Who has asked many questions? Yes, really helpful questions.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I do hope I pronounced your name correctly there, and I apologise if not. One more question. Besides the 3-day conference, how much time do you have for discussion and exchange of ideas with other students? That's a really good question. We try to facilitate that as much as possible. Each of the course units has 2 to 3 tutorials where all of the students will come together virtually with the course unit tutor, and they're often spaces for discussion and dialogue, and for students to kind of have bounce ideas off each other. So they're not kind of lectures; they're very much kind of dialogical kind of spaces, because we're very aware that this program does involve a lot of self-study, a lot of time on your own with your own thoughts and your own ideas, and so anything that we can do to try to facilitate more student peer-to-peer discussion, we do. I'd also probably like to draw attention to Stephen Rayner's course unit on leadership as a social practice, which very much reflects the name, and practice is what it preaches, I suppose, doesn't it, Stephen? Because I know that's something that you try really hard on that unit to try to facilitate, isn't it? That peer-to-peer interaction.
Well, on that particular course unit, actually, you have no choice. You have to have discussion and exchange of ideas with other students, because it's built into the teaching approach on that. You're not assessed on it. It isn't a group assessment, but we do set up activities where you can share your ideas about leadership, talk about your contexts, get peer review. You get lots of review from your tutors. We do that all the time. That's what you'd expect us to do. That's our job. But we also enable peer review where you can get your colleagues looking critically at your work, your plans, giving advice. And I have to say that when we get feedback on that particular course unit, that comes across very strongly from our students, how they have enjoyed that and how they've benefited from getting insights from their colleagues who work in different roles within education.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, so we do our best to try to facilitate that, and I'd say that the short answer is there are plenty of other opportunities outside of the conferences for you to engage with your peers on the program. Okay, lots of space to do that. Okay. Oh no, it's a pleasure. We're here to answer as many questions as you have.
It's really helpful. I'm sure you'll be speaking for some other colleagues as well. There's a question about the IELTS exemption. I'm not a great expert on entry requirements. I think the answer to that is a straightforward yes, Paul. But
I think it is. Yeah. I think it is. I think that's a yes. Thank you for that. Yeah. I think I can say that with some confidence. So okay. And again, thank you for your questions. Very helpful. Okay. Jaslyn, Venus, Jan, I think we've come to the end of the session there. It's 1 o'clock. If anyone has any other questions that they wanted to ask or that they remember that they should have asked after the session's finished, you have our emails, or the emails were on the final slide. If you didn't take note of them, just contact Jaslyn or Venus. They'll be happy to pass them on. There you go. And just send me or Stephen an email and we'll be happy to answer. If it's something that we can't answer, we'll pass you back over to your colleagues, our colleagues, sorry, in Hong Kong or Singapore. They often have knowledge that we don't have. So don't assume that we have all the answers, because often we don't, do we, Stephen? And we'd never claim to have all the answers either. So, but between us, we'll be able to find an answer to your question. So please do continue to engage with us if you've got any more questions. And I really hope to see as many of you as possible in September. Certainly, if this is the program that you think is for you, and I really hope it is. Okay, but more than that, thank you for coming today and listening to us. Share the program with you. I hope you found it informative.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen and Paul. It has been a great session. I'm sure a lot of people will have get the insight as well as for people who actually are those who are interested to join, feel free to contact me or Venus for more questions and things like that. We'll also be following up with you all for any further question or assistance on the applications and others. Feel free to contact us. If not otherwise, thank you so much for taking time this evening to join us today. And I hope this session really give you the insight and the information that you require to sign up for the course itself. If not otherwise, thank you and good night.
Okay, good evening. Thank you.